We are incredibly lucky today to have in our presence a person who's become very, very well known throughout the world. I first came to hear of Dorje Gurung, who is of Nepalese extraction, born in Nepal, which, in case you don't know, is north of India, south of Tibet, and it's the country that contains the world's highest mountain, Mount Everest.
I can just use the buttons.
I first came to hear of Dorje when he was imprisoned.
It's okay. I'll just use the buttons.
In the Middle East, and I'm sure he will share
Yeah, I'll just use this. I'll just use the
something
buttons.
of his story with you.
Do you want me to take this out?
Since that time, he has devoted himself to helping the poor,
Take it out.
those without access to health, money, education, and he's moved back to Nepal after years of IB international school teaching experience in the field of chemistry. So please give a big welcome to Dorje Gurung.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's good to be here, back in Hong Kong. I used to live here. I used to work here about 18 years ago. I used to work at the United World College up in New Territories, Li Po Chun. And it used to be pretty isolated. It used to be in the corner of nowhere. We didn't even have, at the time, MTR station near Li Po Chun. But now there's an MTR station, there are high-rise buildings. Hong Kong has changed. Right. Let me move on to the talk. As Kate said, I've traveled quite a bit, and the talk is all about my experiences and what I think people like you should be doing with their lives. Okay? Right. I wasn't born into privilege. The circumstances and the context of my birth in Nepal meant that considerable odds were stacked against me. That they may even be insurmountable. While I suffered considerably in my life due to the circumstances and context of my birth, they, however, did not determine my destiny. I was able to achieve my dreams. My dreams did take flight. I achieved considerable professional and personal success. I credit that success, firstly, to the privilege of education, both formal and informal, and secondly, to humanity. Education and humanity made all the difference to my life. That discovery, that pursuit of education, that pursuit of my dreams and pursuit of my dreams has led me back to Nepal. After spending most of the last 26 years, pretty much all my adult life, abroad. It's precisely because of that, because I've suffered and owe my success to humanity, that I have returned to Nepal to provide that same privilege to the next generation of Nepalese children born into the kind of background and context I was. This presentation is all about the role humanity played in my dreams taking flight, and why and how I believe humanity will save humanity itself, just as it did me. The small area inside the blue circle is the district of Mustang, where my little village of Tangbe is located. As a child, I used to live there in this little village, with my grandparents. We had no indoor plumbing, no refrigerators, no phones. In other words, hardly any amenities. As a people, we're Tibeto-Nepalese, practicing Tibetan Buddhism, a religion that combines Bon and Buddhism. We speak Seke, a language that's quite limited. It doesn't have a script, and it's only spoken. As of now, as a matter of fact, it's spoken regularly by maybe about 200 people. And so it's on the list of endangered languages. Birth as a Tibeto-Nepalese, a low caste in Nepal, in a poor family, meant that I was not expected to make much of my life. I wasn't even expected to go to school, for instance. But my parents, who lived in Pokhara, the beautiful city of Pokhara, wanted me to join them so that they could send me to school. My family had no history of education. After repeated requests from my parents, my grandfather took me to the city. Living conditions in Pokhara were not much different. Again, we had no indoor plumbing, no fridge, no phones, etc. We were 5 of us in a little room. After a couple of moves, we ended up in a 2-room living arrangement. By that time, we were 7. We were anywhere from 7 to 10 members, including 4 younger brothers and at least 1 or 2 or 3 cousins. I was attending a government school. I was attending government schools at the time. I moved school with movement in residence, and a teacher at this school, at the 3rd school, Bal Jyoti, was the first person I credit with starting me on this incredible journey of education and discovery about the world and humanity. Realizing that I had potential, the story goes that this teacher took my dad aside and told him, "Your son has potential, but if you leave him here, nothing will become of that. Take him to Kathmandu and put him in a good private school," was his advice. Heeding his advice, my dad took me to Kathmandu, and to make a long story short, I ended up at St. Xavier's School, a Jesuit boarding school in the city. At St. Xavier's, I was encouraged and inspired by teachers to dream. They also provided me with the drive to imagine a world and life different from home. One such teacher was Father Downing from Cincinnati, Ohio. Apart from regaling us with stories of the U.S., he would bring former student visitors to the school to talk to us about their lives, many of them either graduates or students at colleges and universities in the U.S. As a result, when in 5th grade, I dreamt of going to the U.S. for further studies and ultimately of returning home to help children from background similar to mine. David Beeston, another North American teacher, for instance, describing how winter in Kathmandu is completely different from that in his hometown in Canada, said something which I never forgot, which I still haven't forgotten. And I quote, in winter, in Winnipeg, when you look out the window, all you see is white everywhere. Growing up surrounded by green hills and mountains in the far-off distance, I was intrigued. The other drive was to be the first one from my village to get qualifications from an institution abroad. In spite of constant pressure to quit school stubbornly, I stayed on and completed high school, becoming the first one from my family, from my entire extended family, to do so. A family of 5 brothers and over 36 cousins, more than a dozen of whom were older than me. Then, in 1988, the next lifeline appeared. A full scholarship to the United World College of Adriatic in Italy. One of a number of things that I recall about my experience at the United World College, one which always gives me a warm feeling in my heart, is the way my friends and their families took care of me and made me feel special during vacations when I couldn't afford to fly home. My friends would invite me to stay with their families. Not only that, over winter break, for instance, the family would give me Christmas presents, just as they did their own children. An Italian family not only gave me a present, not only bought presents for me, they also bought a gift to give to a very good friend of mine on her birthday as a present from me. During those 2 years, I was on the receiving end of incredible generosities and kindness. Also, during those 2 years, I met and befriended students from all over the world, shrinking my world. Living in Italy and traveling a bit in the neighboring countries, I also got a glimpse into the natural beauty of our planet. I got a glimpse into the worlds I had read about in the novels I had devoured as a student in Nepal. And it was during those 2 years that I came to believe that we humans of different nationalities and different cultures and practicing different religions had more commonalities than differences. Humanity, I learned, I felt, I discovered, tied us all together. Towards the end of my UWC career, my UWC experience, I realized my childhood dream of going to the US. The scholarship I had been dreaming about since 5th grade came the spring of 1990, taking me to Grinnell College in Iowa in the US. At Grinnell College between 1990 and 1994, again, I met some amazing people. And I was on the receiving end of a great deal of, again, kindness and generosity. Graduating from Grinnell, I became the first person from my village, and maybe even the whole of Upper Mustang, where my village is from, to get tertiary education from an educational institution abroad. Approaching graduation, I knew what I wanted to do, and it wasn't to return to Nepal. Not immediately anyway. The spring of '94, my last semester at Grinnell, one late afternoon, watching the late afternoon sky turning different hues every several seconds, my friend Aubrey had asked, "So, what do you want to do?" I remember clearly telling her, "I want to go see the world." But the trouble was, I had no idea how. As luck would have it, my former chemistry teacher at the United World College of the Adriatic invited me back to the college. I jumped at the opportunity, and that put me on a career of teaching, traveling, and exploring the world. For most of the 20 years between 1994 and 2014, I pursued a fantastic international teaching career spanning 10 different countries, from United States in the west to Vietnam in the east, from Norway in the north to Malawi in southern Africa, and countries like Azerbaijan, Hong Kong, and the United Kingdom in between, expanding on my network of friends around the world still. By the time I approached the end of my teaching career, I traveled to about 36 different countries, and my network of friends spanned the world. I had seen and done some amazing things in this incredible world of ours, and had learned a great deal about it. I had trekked to an altitude as high as 5,500 meters in Nepal, and scuba dived to a depth of 31 meters in the Philippines. I'd swum with wild dolphins off the coast of Zanzibar. I'd skied in the Swiss Alps, snow-camped in Norway, hiked in the Dolomites in Italy, had gone hot air ballooning in Australia, and that's me up there somewhere, next to the red scarf. Can't quite tell, can you? That's in Australia. And had gone on wildlife safaris in Nepal, in Zambia, and the awesome Ngorongoro crater, and the incomparable Serengeti Plains in Tanzania. I'd learned to play the didgeridoo, ultimate frisbee, and to dance salsa and merengue. All the while, of course, I'd been planning to return to Nepal to fulfill my original dream. The only question had been, when? In preparation for the eventual return, ever since leaving Nepal for the first time in 1988, I'd been visiting Nepal almost once every year. During those visits to Nepal, I would make every effort to visit my hometown of Pokhara and also my village of Tangbe in Mustang. In Pokhara, I would visit the streets we'd lived in and would also make every effort to visit the government schools I had attended. Going back often was the only way to keep myself from losing my way. My way back to the beginning, to where my life's adventure had begun. In the meantime, the educational opportunities I'd had, the professional experience I had, the travel opportunities, what I'd experienced, what I did, what I'd done, what I saw, what I'd been given and rewarded with by people I had studied, taught, worked, and traveled with. All those privileges I'd had, they had all been beyond the wildest imagination of the 1981 fifth grade school kid in Kathmandu, Nepal, dreaming of going abroad for studies and making something of himself. Not surprisingly, therefore, even as I was doing everything I felt I needed to maintain my connection to where I came from, those experiences would transform me into a person I hadn't imagined then. One of the first important transformation was that of thinking of myself as a human being first, and then everything else. All aspects of my identity, my nationality, my ethnicity, etc., coming next. Countries and nationalities stopped meaning much, especially since I had friends spanning the world. Countries represented more faces and people than political and geographical entities. The other result of having the privilege of getting formal education in 5 different countries, working in 10 countries spanning 5 continents, and traveling to another 30 or so, the results of these experiences was drawing certain conclusions about life and the world we live in. Here's one of the first ones. You can all read that, right? Okay. At the core of that is the confirmation I felt I got for my belief in compassion, a Buddhist belief. However, having been born a Buddhist in a Hindu kingdom and grown up attending a Jesuit school in Nepal, having gotten a high school diploma in Italy, a Catholic country, and worked in 2 Islamic countries, etc., I've also realized the following about beliefs. One could make one's life meaningful, for instance, by living according to a certain set of beliefs, but not insist or require or demand that others also believe and live by them. Having been born into a low socioeconomic background in Nepal and everything else that followed, the following is also abundantly clear to me now. And those core values are none other than kindness, generosity, and compassion. In other words, humanity. That which I came across all through my life. That which I was a beneficiary of pretty much all my life. What I also came to realize, having experienced poverty and having seen this all over the world, everywhere, is this. Incidentally, all of those photos are my own. I met this porter on a trek to my village along part of the Annapurna circuit, way back in the spring of 2000. The man's load was so heavy that he took maybe a step every 2 seconds. But because he was so poor and was paid so little, he carried his own food and cooking utensils to save as much as he could. The poorest and some of the hardest working people on this planet have the hardest time even putting a meal, a decent single meal, on the table for themselves and their children. And yet, these very people, the weakest and the most vulnerable, the poor, the marginalized, and their children, are often treated the worst. I, however, have believed in the following for a long time. Some of the weakest and the most vulnerable in Nepal are the children of poor families, children of Dalits, the untouchables, the lowest of the low castes in Nepal, children of marginalized groups such as Tamangs and Tharus, especially girls. So, in March 2013, I'd finally decided to return home for good to help vulnerable Nepalese children, children from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Except I would take a detour. On May 1st, as Kate mentioned, I would be thrown in jail for allegedly insulting Islam following a minor incident in the cafeteria with a few students at Qatar Academy in Doha, Qatar, where I was working at the time. And once again, people came to my rescue. Classmates and schoolmates from St. Xavier's School in Nepal and abroad. Classmates, schoolmates, and teachers from the United World College of the Adriatic spread all over the world. Classmates, college mates, and personnel from Grinnell College. Colleagues from Qatar Academy itself. Former colleagues and friends from when I worked in other UWCs and other countries like Azerbaijan, United States of America, and Malawi. Former students from various UWCs, such as the Red Cross Nordic UWC, and other schools I taught around the globe, etc., came to my rescue. They mobilized themselves and their friends to get me out of prison, to right the injustice that had visited me. Thousands who had no personal relationship to me joined the campaign, including Kate, in calling for a due process or my release on the grounds of human rights and justice. The campaign had gotten so big that within 4 days of initiation, I was released. I returned home on May 13 after spending 11 nights and 12 days to the hour in jail. The reason behind my victimization, once again, had to do with the circumstances of my birth, being Nepalese. The 20-month experience at Qatar Academy in general, and the 12 days in jail in particular, was yet another lesson in pain, suffering, and redemption by humanity. What I experienced during those days in jail, you will most likely not be able to relate to nor will understand. I don't mean that you're not intelligent enough, nor am I trying to be patronizing. As a matter of fact, I hope you never in your life get to a point where you're able to relate to or understand experiences such as that. If you do, then that will unfortunately mean that you have suffered too. Having already reached bottom during my time at Qatar Academy, emotionally and psychologically, long before the incarceration, when the ordeal began the afternoon of May 1st, with the huge metal door to my private cell closing with a loud bang, shutting me inside a cold, wet room. Shutting me inside the cold, wet room. I had the feeling that the bottom had been pulled from under me, so to speak. Such despair, no one should have to face. No one. But there were others in jail, as well as outside in Qatar and elsewhere, who had lost everything and as a result lived and continued to live with such despair every single day. And what's more, in Nepal and many other countries I've lived and traveled to, there are hundreds of thousands who live in despair every single day. In Nepal, there are families of migrant laborers, poor families and their children belonging to low castes, etc. Since returning home, May 13th, 2013, I've been doing what I can to give back to humanity that gave me so much. Working with schools catering to children from low socioeconomic backgrounds, vulnerable children. I'm doing everything I can through Committed, the organization I run with my buddy J.G. Hada, and at times also independently. Committed helps government and community schools, schools where children from low socioeconomic backgrounds attend, schools similar to the ones I started my own academic career at, to ensure that they have a shot at a better life than their parents. Our main project site is the little village of Thangpalkot in Sindhupalchok district, an adjoining district to Kathmandu. Apart from helping schools acquire resources and build infrastructure, we set up what we call a social business to generate income for the school so that it is self-sustainable. In Thangpalkot, at the school, at our project school of Raithane, the business is a fishery. That brings me to why I do what I do. Why I do the kind of work I do in Nepal. I do them for two reasons. Firstly, to ensure that those children realize their dreams and have, if even on a small scale, the kind of incredible life I've had. Namely, to see and learn about this marvelous world we live in and the people we share it with. And secondly, and more importantly, to ensure that they do not experience the suffering, the pain, and the despair that I have experienced, which they invariably will, especially little girls and Dalit children, if no one does anything about their situation. I believe in international understanding, a phrase and a concept I was introduced to when I was a student at the United World College of the Adriatic. International understanding to me is nothing other than seeing the world through others' eyes, empathizing with others, being kind, being generous, being benevolent, being compassionate. In other words, displaying humanity. What's more, I believe our feelings for fellow human beings, our compassion and empathy for fellow human beings, and our ability to see ourselves in the shoes of fellow human beings will contribute to make the world a better place, a more peaceful place, a goal of the United World College, a goal of United World College education. Having been on the receiving end of the incredible degree of humanity from people everywhere, from teachers from when I was a young student at Bal Jyoti School in Pokhara, all the way to Grinnell College in the US, from others in Nepal and abroad when I was a student, as well as when I was a teacher, and when I was jailed, from having had the opportunity to transform my life into something that was way beyond the wildest imagination of the young Dorje of Nepal, I believe humanity is the only thing that will save humanity. That is yet another reason why I do what I do. And you, all of you gathered here today, you who have opportunities that a large percentage of children around the world don't and won't have, the network of friends you have established and will continue to expand on in the years to come will give you a power that most people don't and won't have. How you use that will be entirely up to you. My hope is that you will use it to make your life meaningful, just as I have tried and continue to try to do. Thank you.